Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder to a full tank review on a new German light tank. At least it is in the German tech tree, and it is the actual Argentinian medium tank, the TAM 2C, or as it is pronounced in Argentinian or Spanish, Tanque Argentino Mediano 2C. I hope I pronounced this right. I do not really know how to speak Spanish, so forgive me if, or probably that I mispronounced this. Anyway, so in Argentinian military, this is a medium tank. However, here in War Thunder, it is a light tank. There are game mechanics, and what actually the tank means within the German tech tree, what it means in its overall performance, how it does fare well in the current meta, all this shall be explained in a tank review that now follows. Before we go into the little details about all the statistics, a few things up front. First of all, this tank has been given to me for a test drive by Gaijin Entertainment, so it's fully spaded. And I also bought the camouflage for 200 golden eagles, and I really like it. And the next thing is, what is an actual tank review? Well, it's not me talking about the tank here and there and just, let you have a good gameplay, a single battle or just a few scenes. No, it's me going really into the details. That takes time. Some things might be mentioned here and there more than once. Some things might see a little bit dry, and for people that use their smartphones to watch it, it might get a bit much on the screen. So this is intended to be viewed on a desktop PC or, a big screen overall, because I will spam you a little bit with information here. This is what a tank review really means for me. Other content creators do it differently, and that is to everybody's personal liking. But this is how I do it, because I still get criticized hard for when I do a first impressions, and then people confuse this with an actual tank review because they haven't seen one on my channel yet, so they don't know to which standards I go. Now, please don't think that this is now meant as an arrogant, I do it better than everybody else. I just have my own way of, running the numbers and just comparing it. You may or may not like it. It is down to your personal liking. But this has been my style for quite some years, and I shall continue this. So, without further ado, let's go right into the review, shall we? As usual, I want to begin with the armor, and we can straight away see that this tank is not really an actual medium tank. It is very lightly armored. The best is 32mm of rolled homogeneous armor, and that only on the lower glacis and parts of the upper glacis, whereas the center of the upper glacis, while being angled at 77 degrees, is only 11mm thin. That is nothing. That won't stop really anything. There might be the hint of a chance of a possibility that it once in a while, due to the angle, might ricochet a PFSDS, but please don't rely on it, even if you use the full gun depression. Then we come to the side, and it's not really looking that much better. We have here 15mm of armor, a bit angled, but the real oof comes when we look behind the suspension. Then it is only 15mm dead flat, and the side skirts will not really help anything against not just SPA but even 50 cals that are mounted on Soviet, American, and a lot of other Western MBTs. The rear as well, really thin. Then the engine deck is only 5mm to 11mm. Same as the turret roof. The turret side and front are a bit thicker with 25. There might be some overlay, but it realistically won't help you in any way, shape or form. So this is paper thin armor, and hence I think the description of an actual light tank in War Thunder is more appropriate than medium tank, because even the Leopard 1 series might be better in terms of protection, especially versus SPA. And due to it being a light tank, it has hull break if it gets just hit or touched by HESH, heat and HE rounds, and even APFSDS once they hit internal components like the transmission the engine, or the cannon breech. And yeah, while the transmission and the engine is mounted in the front just like the Merkava, do not really rely on it stopping anything. Maybe a short burst of an SPA, but other than this, it will lead very often to a hull break. It's not 100% reliable due to it being a Gaijin game mechanic. And then we come to the rest of the internal components. First, the crew. We have 4, and the driver and the loader are on the right hand side, and the gunner and the commander are on the left hand side. But the 3 turret crew members, despite the tank being rather spacious and big and empty, are very close together. So just aim for the turret ring, or channel the turret, and it will be very likely that you will cause a crew knockout. Then we have the ammunition, and with full ammunition you have 3 big ammo racks which are standing upright, which gives them a huge hitting area, so you can ammo rack this tank outright without even hull breaking it. And well, even if you remove a large portion of the ammunition, you still have ammunition in the back of the turret where the majority of the ready rack is, and that will then cause, obviously also with a turret penetration, especially by APFSDS, just an ammo explosion and the tank is outright dead. So the tank is very fragile, and it is rather big, surprisingly big for a light tank. And without further ado, I think let's move on to some other statistics to see what it else has got going for it. So let's begin the statistical analysis and comparison with a look at the mobility. The TAM2C has, with a 720 horsepower strong engine, the weakest in comparison, but therefore is the lightest also, with 30.5 tons. That gives it a horsepower to ton ratio of 23.6. Let's go back to the horsepower of the engine. That is a problem for a light tank, because it has then a lot of problems to keep up the momentum, because the engine just simply doesn't have the grunt, even though it's light. That stops it pretty much dead on any sort of concrete wall, when it has to push through a tree, when it wants to just swivel around, when it wants to accelerate, when it wants to go uphill. Only the raw power counts, as well as when pushing through mud. So that is a big downside, and as you can see, the discrepancy to some of the higher speed MBTs like the KPZ-70, the XM1 GM, and also the Vickers Mark 7 is quite considerable. Yes, you beat the likes of the T-72A and the MX-32, but you know, it's just not really what you expect from a quick, nimble light tank. And when you combine this with the hull break and the huge profile and the weak armor, that's not a really good combination of facts so far. So the top speed at least is only second to the XM1, and the reverse speed is then best in class, and this is then just finished off with a neutral steering. So the tank isn't really slow, but don't expect this to be something that zooms across the battlefield unseen, and also to get to any place quicker than your opposition. Now finally, let's talk about the business end of the tank, the gun. In the TAM2C's case, the 105mm FMK4 Modelo 1L, which is in its overall behavior just like a normal Western L7 gun variant. So it has the joint lowest caliber together with the XM1, but that doesn't really mean all that much. First of all, you have a very high amount of ammunition, 50 rounds. You can take out over half of them to lower the chance of ammo explosions, as previously shown in the X-ray, and that is then still more than enough for any sort of given battle. The reload for a fully trained ace crew is 6.7 seconds, and that is kind of the Western standard at around this battle rating, regardless of if you have a 105 or a 120mm. Obviously there are exceptions, and the KPZ-70's 152mm gun launcher has an autoloader with 6.0 seconds, regardless of the crew skills. So it's always better than you. If you have quote-unquote only a fully trained expert crew, then you have more like the T-72's autoloader, 7.1 seconds of reload. And then there is still the Vickers Mark 7 that has, again with a fully trained crew, 6.0 seconds. So your reload is not really bad in comparison, but there are many tanks that are equal or even better than you. And they are more widely used, I guess. Then we come to the remainers of the gun handling, and this is where a little bit of redemption comes in for the tank. The turret rotation with 34 degrees per second is really good, but again not best in class. That goes to the XM1, quickly followed by the KPZ-70. But you are a country mile ahead of your opposition that in the shape of the T-72A has only 20 degrees per second, which feels really slow at this point. The gun depression is one of those points where the tank is surprisingly bad. Now, it's not outstandingly bad or unusable, but it feels more like a Soviet tank in this aspect, which might caught you off guard because the rest of the German tanks have more like 10 degrees of gun depression, and you're more used to this if you grind up to this battle rating. So -7 degrees, that is not allowing you to perform in any sort of situation, and if you take too long to just find that little bit of ridgeline dip where you then can point your gun at the enemies might have seen you and swung their guns around already. So this is where the tank is a little bit limited. More often that has gotten me killed than I would like to admit, but that's just my experience. 80 degrees or 18 degrees of gun elevation then is not really bad, but it kind of limits your usage of the main gun versus aircraft, although you can also use your 2 light machine guns. Sadly, you don't have a heavy machine gun on top to threaten those aircraft a bit more, and also the helicopters, which have a very easy time of hull breaking you with missiles, rockets, bombs, or even their main guns. They can shred you because you're so weakly armored. The elevation speed with 15 degrees per second feels very comfortable. Yes, it's not as crazy as the KPZ-70 and the XM1, but this is really head and shoulders above some of the other tanks, may they be Soviet or Western design, such like the T-72, Vickers Mark 7 and MX-32, which have somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5 degrees per second. Where the tank is then really good is the thermal imaging. First of all, the quality is crystal clear, and then you also not just only have it for the gunner, but also the commander, which allows you to spot and range find in complete cover without exposing any sort of part of the tank. So that is really great, and just kind of gives you the first hint that this tank is very good at long range. So one problem that then comes right with that sad sentence is that well, there is at the very moment of making the review only one setting for the magnification. So you can't zoom in, you can't zoom out. That is then really strange at certain distances, and you might then switch to the binoculars. Now let's talk about the ammunition, and we begin with the DM12 Heat FS, which is fairly well known, I guess. It has 400 millimeters of penetration at any distance. It has neutral normalization, so 200 millimeters at 60 degrees angles of attack. It has a muzzle velocity of 1173 meters per second. For long range shooting, I also obviously highly recommend to use the laser rangefinder, which is pretty good on this tank. The laser warning system though that comes with it is not really that great, to be honest, but either way. The shell does fairly well versus steel armor and at distance, but it does very poorly versus era protection, versus a lot of the composite armor, versus Nero, and also versus bushes, trees, fences, especially in city environment where it just detonates prematurely on contact with everything. So it's not that this shell is useless, but you have to put more effort into making it work than with some of the other shell types. namely the DM33 APFSDS round, which is a tier 1 modification. First of all, it has a higher mass velocity with 1455 meters per second. Then at first glance it seems to have more or less the same amount of penetration with 408 millimeters. However, it drops off at 2000 meters. We go down to 370 millimeters. However, looking at the 60 degrees angles of attack line, we can see that we have positive normalization with 236 millimeters. So this performs significantly better versus ERA and NERA, and also lots of the composite armor just can't withstand this kind of brute kinetic impact. And it also doesn't really prematurely detonate on bushes, trees, fences like the heat does. So it is more comfortable to use, more comfortable to lead, has more or less the same amount of post-penetration damage effect, and it is also easier to use versus aircraft in my experience. So this is definitely the first of the tier 1 modifications that you should get. The other two tier 1 modifications which are interesting are obviously parts and also the DM502, aka the hash round. It has at first glance a really bad mass velocity of 732 meters per second and only 127 millimeters of penetration. But if it connects to a flat part of armor, then the post-penetration damage effect can be really good, and you also might be able to lob it over a ridgeline or some sort of cover at fairly big distances if you're really good with your aim using the laser rangefinder, etc. So I would always then, once you have the APFSDS round, research this one after the parts and then substitute the heat round with it, because it still can cause hull break on lightly armored vehicles without hitting any sort of critical components, which in certain situations is really the best choice that you can make when the enemy is aware of you, or you don't have a clear shot, or you have to expose too much of your tank. The fourth and last shell type is the DM63 APFSDS round as a tier 4 modification. It has the same mass velocity as the tier 1 APFSDS with 1455 meters per second, but has substantially higher penetration with 436 millimeters, and even at 60 degrees angles of attack we climb over the 250 millimeters mark. So at first glance it gives the shell a little bit of a lol pen feeling, but at closer inspection it is best to use this shell the same way that you use then the tier 1 modification and go for the weak spots. Everybody anyway goes for the gun breaches, gun barrels of enemy tanks, or the driver's hatches on Soviet MBTs, and for the side shots you obviously then go for the ammo. So this is not so much of an important upgrade to get. I think the tier 1 APFSDS round is all that it realistically takes. However, in this comparison we can see that it has the highest penetration at 60 degrees angles of attack. In this comparison, not even the T72A beats it, although it comes very close. So this is a really good shell, and you can make it work at higher tiers as well. And that then gives a little bit away one of the problems with light tanks, that they very often have on paper some of the strongest armament, whereas then on higher battle ratings they have to pay for it with having hull break and actually not being that fast. So that has been practically the statistical comparison on this tank. So at the end of the objective review, let's come to a little bit of a personal verdict on this tank, with the question, is this tank really good? Is it exciting? Is it cool? Well, first of all, I really like the look and the shape of the tank. The rear mounted turret is just one cool feature that I already really liked on the first TAM, and also on a very similar chassis, the Begleitpanzer Syphon Signal. However, the tank is also a little bit of a dead end in more than one ways. First of all, quite literally, it's the end of the line, with a battle rating reaching quote-unquote only 9.3. So if you want to go for top tier tanks, you obviously want to have to research the Leopard line, with the Leopard 2K being amazing, the Leopard 2A4 leading up to the amazing Leopard 2A5. And also at its battle rating, the KPZ-70 is faster, has better gun handling, faster reload, with a very exciting roof-mounted 20mm secondary gun. And yeah, when it comes to real light tank speed feeling, go for the predecessor, the Radkampfwagen 90, which at lower battle rating offers you higher speed. And then the only advantage that the TAM 2C has is a better shell and also thermal imaging. And well, it depends how often you get really large maps where you can use this. So no, this tank is not bad, but it's definitely also not exciting. And I think if you really go for it, is down to your only opinion. However, I gave you the statistical comparison to make up your own mind. And with having said this, that's it for me today. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I put a lot of effort into this video, so it would be really cool if you would give it a like. And also let me know in the comment section what you thought about this kind of review, if you liked it, the style, etc. And also if you agree or disagree with the final verdict. And with having said this, we will see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.